I'm Katie Baker of Newsweek and the Daily Beast, and I have with me Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, our junior senator from New York State. During her time in the Senate, she's made women's issues a priority, and she's worked to get more women engaged in their communities and the political process through her Off the Sidelines campaign. Last year, she launched the Off the Sidelines Book Club as a way to engage readers with books, and in this case, a play, that touch on the theme of women's empowerment. Joining her is the legendary and luminary actress Holland Taylor. She's been nominated for 7 Emmys, appeared in films such as Legally Blonde, Romancing the Stone, and The Truman Show, and she's one of the finest Broadway performers of our time. She also wrote the one-woman show we're going to discuss tonight on the life of Texas's irrepressible former governor, Ann Richards. Ann premiered in Galveston, Texas, and has since toured San Antonio, Austin, Chicago, and Washington, D.C.'s Kennedy Center, before opening at Lincoln Center's Vivian Beaumont Theater, where it will run through early September. And finally, we have Amber Mostyn of Annie's List, a Texas organization that's working to get more female candidates up for election. Welcome, all of you, and now over to you, Kirsten.
Well, welcome to our participants. It's so exciting. I think for those of you who have now read the play, and for the few of us who have seen the play, you know how incredible it is, and how the life of Ann Richards is really was not only a groundbreaking political history, but she really serves as a role model for many women in public service and many women who are trying to make a difference. So I'm incredibly grateful for our participation. I want to thank Holland specifically for your unbelievable work, your vision, and your performance. It's incredible. So we have a lot of questions for you about what made you write this play and what it's like to be Ann Richards. And I think all of you will really enjoy this conversation. I want to thank Amber for participating. For those of you not from Texas, Annie's List is one of the most powerful organizations, grassroots organizations, that empowers women to run for office. And Annie's List organizes women all across the state to care about these candidates, to fund these candidates, and to help them win. So Amber's going to talk about her experience, and she'll have a lot of input. And I want to thank you for hosting us. It's wonderful to have the Daily Beast be at the forefront of these issues time and time again. It makes a huge difference.
It absolutely does. So, Senator, would you like to talk about what you thought about the play and maybe why you think it would be a good fit for Off the Sidelines?
Well, I loved the play because I thought it brought a legendary icon to life in a way that is really eye-opening. And I liked it because it was so personal. You got to know her as a woman. You got to know her as a mother, as a wife, as a leader. And those personal stories, I think, certainly inspire me, but serve as a role model for women. And what Off the Sidelines fundamentally is about is a call to action to ask women to participate, asking them to have their voice be heard, asking them to vote, asking them to be advocates. And if they do want to serve publicly, to run for office, and then to support women who are running for office. So she's a great role model, and her story really can enlighten people and give them courage to fight for what they believe in.
I'm going to ask Holland about a question from the audience.
Is this going to be on this speaker?
Yes, this is this speaker. Wow. So this is from Goldalee Katzinis Semmel. She says, "Thank you, Mrs. Taylor, for your inspiring creative expression and contribution in showcasing Ann Richards, another empowered and inspiring woman. I imagine that there were so many moments of inspiration for you as you researched, wrote, and now perform your play. Can you describe one for us?"
I think the most critical one for me was the initial one. I'd been mourning her death, but from afar. I didn't know her. I'd met her once. But she had made such an impact on my psyche, and I guess the center of me, that I didn't know about. So when she died, I was affected in a way that made no sense. And I wanted to do something creative, and as an actress I thought, well, I'll play her in something. And one day, months later, when I was driving to work, it came to me and it really was like a vision of some kind. It came to me as I'm driving to work on 2.5 Men 6 years ago. Oh no, I'm not going to play her in some movie or something. It's got to be a play, because she was so alive, and it is about her communication with others, and her uplifting, and her inspiring, and her warmth with others. That's what she was. And I suddenly thought it could be a play. I was bombarded in those minutes by ideas for what kind of play, how to shape it, the organizing principles of the play, the 5 or 6 things that shape this play, that I had to pull over, turn off my car, and sit by the roadside and come up with these, fleshing out these ideas. And those 5 ideas remain the governing principles of the play to this day, and I never look back. And that's what's called inspiration.
That's an amazing story.
So can I jump in with another question here?
Sure.
This is from Carolyn Connor. She says, as a native Texan, and Amber, you might be able to weigh in on this, as a native Texan who's lived in New York for many years, and having just seen this great performance, where did you get all those wonderful Texisms, those great expressions only a real Texan grows up with?
I got them by hanging out with a lot of real Texans, like about an hour, 100 hours of film of Ann Richards, 4 or 5 hours of tape of her jam sessions with her speechwriter for 15 years. Many hours for the past 30 years with Liz Smith, who was a great friend of Ann's and also a dear friend of mine, and who is about as native Texan as you can get, and actually a little older than Ann. There's the generational, too. A lot of those expressions are very much women cut from that bolt. And actually, my Aunt Louise, who's from Philadelphia, has a few expressions that are in this play. She's long gone to her reward, but she was a similar personality to Anne, and some of her expressions found their way into the play because I know Anne would say, if she heard them, she'd say, oh, that's good, I'm going to use that. So I don't put anything in it that isn't correct.
So one of the things I'd love for all of us to discuss is that one of the most powerful lines in the play to me was when Ann Richards says, you know, something to the effect of, I'm probably messing this up, but how could you think your life was just about you? No,
it's not how could you think. She's urging people to participate more in their lives, and it doesn't mean public service necessarily or politics. In fact, what she wanted people to be was involved in anything, involved even in their own dreams, not to be just cut off. And so the part of the play where she says that, and the play is about 15% slices and slivers of actual things she said that are all in my head, and when I needed them in the shaping of the play, they would pop in, they would present themselves, and that is an actual line of hers. And I use it in a speech at the end where I'm encouraging people to participate in government in some way, even if very much on the sidelines or off the sidelines, if you will. And it ends with, you know, the government is the most pervasive institution in our lives. You don't participate in some way, well, you're just letting other people make some big old decisions for you. And anyway, why should your life be just about you? And it's always a very
I remember when you delivered that line the night I saw the play, and I thought, God, it was so powerful. But I really wanted to hear what Amber had to say about her perspective on being a Texan, being so involved with Annie's List, trying to carry on the torch that Ann Richards lit for so many. What's it like for you as a woman who's organizing other women today?
Well, thank you, Senator. It really is just a wonderful reinvigoration and rebirth of sort of the Ann's spirit in Texas. You know, there's a lot of attention on Texas right now and on our political, on what's going on here politically. And it's just so wonderful. There's a documentary being made about Ann, and then for Miss Taylor to do her incredible play, which she brought here to Texas first, which we were all very happy and proud of her for doing. It's really, truly reinvigorated a lot of women in the political community here. It really has. And it's very important because when women vote, then women can make a difference in women's lives and in their families' lives, and that seems to be the real message of the play. The way Holland, I got chills when she delivered that line at the end, because that really seems to sum it up for me and my family as well, while we're involved, and for all the women of Annie's List, why they get involved in this. Your life is about more than just you.
Maybe you should say what Annie's List is, Amber.
I will, Holland. Annie's List is a Texas statewide organization, and our goal is to elect Democratic women to office, all from city offices to state offices. We helped elect our first gay mayor in Texas of Houston, Anise Parker, and we have an incredible track record. This is our 10th year anniversary. And over the last 10 years, we have elected and re-elected 22 women to public office. We're really looking.
Well, I was at that event at your house.
Yes, you were.
Gathering.
Yes, and wonderfully generous of you to come. Everybody still talks about you and your speech the next day at the luncheon. And in fact, I always tell everybody a funny story that I was getting ready to go do my speech. You were sitting next to me at the luncheon table, and they introduced me and told me to stand up and wave. So I stood up and very quickly just raised my hand and kind of waved. And I sat back down. And you leaned over to me and you said, "Darling, that was pathetic. If you're going to stand up, do it with purpose." And I thought, well, here is a award-winning actress who just critiqued my stand and wave, and now I'm about to have to do a speech, but it's just perfect because that's exactly something like what Ann Richards would have done.
And it's something we all need to hear. Is if
Absolutely.
You do it with purpose.
Absolutely.
I had to learn those lessons long ago. I'm a lot older than you. Remember that. By the minute.
Well, I appreciate it, and hopefully I strode to the podium with purpose after that.
You absolutely did.
Senator, may I jump in here and ask, going back to Amber's point about the importance of women participating, that's something that you have really worked long and hard for. We all remember your great line during the election about how if Congress was 50% women, we would not even be having some of these discussions right now.
We wouldn't be having Annie's list. We wouldn't need
That's
Annie's
right.
list.
So would you just like to talk a bit about what in the play touched you with the advocacy you've been doing?
Well, what I loved so much about the play was the personal story of a woman who had great courage to make a difference in her state, to take on very entrenched interests and put families first and put her own family first. And everything she lived through and what she decided for herself are the kinds of decisions that any woman who's an advocate or in her community or just trying to get through her day that we wrestle with. And so I think having her as a role model, as a great leader, made a difference. And what we're trying to accomplish with Off the Sidelines is engagement, and something that Ann Richards would have so approved of, not only just voting at the ballot box, but really holding our elected leaders accountable and making sure that they put our opinions and priorities at the top of their lists. And if they don't, then holding them accountable. So I think that it's that engagement that Ann was so good at engendering. But second, it's also about women in power, women achieving positions of leadership so that they can influence their communities.
Amber, can we ask you about the legacy of Governor Ann Richards in Texas?
Absolutely, I'd love to talk about that. She has very specific legacies, not only in her appointments, because when she came to the governor's office, it was the promise of her campaign and of all of her campaign staff and all of her friends who ran the campaign with her, because that's essentially what her gubernatorial campaign was, is Ann Richards and all of her political friends who had been working in Texas and in Austin for years electing other people. So she became Travis County Commissioner and then went on to become the treasurer of the state, and then there came the opportunity for her to be the governor. To run for governor, and it was an extremely tough race. Once she made it to the governor's office, she appointed over 2,400 people to various agencies, committees, advisory panels, and if there wasn't a committee, she made one up. And so at the end of her tenure, of those 2,400 appointments, 44% of them were women, which is it was just incredible. There's one story, she appointed a woman to railroad commissioner, and some old Texas oil man called John Sharp and said, "Who is this Leonardo Guerrero who's about to be the new railroad commissioner?" And John Sharp supposedly said, "Oh, it's worse than that. That he is a she. Her name is Lena." And then of her appointments, 20% of them were Hispanic. And 14% were African American. And the tentacles of the people she had appointed can be felt all throughout Texas politics and national politics today. Ron Kirk was her Secretary of State. He went on to become the mayor of Dallas, and he is now the U.S. Trade Representative under, or has just resigned as the U.S. Trade Representative under President Obama. And Vanessa Gilmore is one of the district court judges we have down here on the federal bench. She was appointed by Ann to her Department of Commerce. I think really interesting, a lot of people don't realize that both Sheila Jackson Lee, the congresswoman from here in Houston, who's been a wonderful congresswoman for many, many years, and Barbara Jordan, who was our first African-American congresswoman, were both put on advisory panels by Ann Richards. Barbara Jordan had been in politics and had taken a brief hiatus. Ann Richards appoints her and puts her on an advisory panel, really got her back into, gave her the political bug back. But, you know, other than that, she has quite a legislative history here in Texas. Interestingly, many people believe that one of the reasons she did not win her re-election bid was she had vetoed the concealed carry handgun bill here in Texas. And she had also signed a bill banning the cop killer bullets. So
What? Banning what?
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Why not?
No, the cop killer bullets.
Yeah, well, I think there are quite a few reasons, Amber.
Yes.
One was Karl Rove.
Oh, absolutely.
Ann Richards was at the actual height of her popularity then. There also was an enormous thing, a Barton Springs deal, where she stopped an advance of an enormous development that would have damaged the aquifer under Austin. There were many, many powerful real estate and other forces that were really infuriated by this. But Karl Rove was really learning his enormous talent. He was one of the brilliant men in the world, learning how to depict people without leaving any fingerprints. And he did a very successful job.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's important to say, too, that Ann and her team knew that they had a short window of time to come in and try to change things. And they did a lot very quickly. And they upset the oil and gas business, the real estate developers, the insurance industry, a lot of very wealthy and powerful interest groups who lined up
I think the dominant vote was in many ways from rural communities and poor communities and from average people across the country, because partly she won because Republican women had swung over to her because of how her opponent in the gubernatorial race was so insulting to women. And then when Ann had been around for 4 years and everybody was crazy about her, those Republicans, this is just one of the things, a lot of them saw this handsome young man who was the son of a president who had a lot of money for the campaign, and it was a very affable guy, and he says, gee, I'm so pretty, I want to be governor. and a lot of those Republican women voted for him.
You know, I'd love to jump in here and ask Senator, one of the lines in the play is, women have a talent for building consensus. We were just talking about Republican women coming over to vote for Ann Richards. Could you talk about some of your experience with that? You know, Republican women helping on your legislation?
Yeah. One of the reasons why I'm really trying to involve more women in politics is that when we look at Washington, we know it's broken. And if you ever want to change Washington, you need to change the players. And women have made a difference in building consensus, in trying to find common ground. More female senators who are Republican are often more interested in solving problems than partisan politics. And so we're able to work across party lines to develop consensus, to find common ground and get things done. It happened when we repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Susan Collins led the charge. The same thing happened when Susan and I worked on the Stock Act, when we banned insider trading for members of Congress and their families. We also had bipartisan support when I was working on the 9/11 health bill. Lisa Murkowski and Olympia Snowe were going to their caucus meetings every week saying, why aren't we standing with our first responders? We should support Kirsten's bill. So my experience has been is that what women often bring to the table is that eagerness to solve problems and willingness to put the partisan politics aside. So I'd like more women in Congress. And so I'm focused this election cycle on helping a few of my Senate colleagues who are up in red and purple states. Kay Hagan is running, Jean Shaheen is running, Mary Landrieu. They all come from tough states. And so we're going to try to raise them funds and make sure they come back to the Senate. We're also recruiting some women to run. We have a number of women who are looking at races that we're hoping convince will run. We have a woman candidate who's looking at running against Mitch McConnell, and hopefully she'll decide to do that. We have another woman who might run in South Dakota, and I'm hoping she'll do that. And we have a candidate in Georgia. So I really want to see women in leadership because they can fix things in Washington by being that bipartisan consensus builder that we need. Women also have, in my experience, try harder to form personal friendships. We have a dinner every quarter of all the women senators, Democrats and Republicans. Kelly Ayotte is on a softball team with me that raises money for breast cancer. We try to do personal things to build those relationships so when we do need to work together, we have a basis to work from.
In support of that, Senator, I'd like to point out that the line about consensus is something that Anne actually said. She said, women have a talent for bringing consensus. And then she adds something like, I bent it a little bit, it's all those hours at the dinner table, trying to make sure everyone has their say and gets a piece of the pie too.
Yeah.
So that's the, sort of the background of it. And then, but also about what Senator says about her colleagues as friends. All of Anne's people, women that she had put in high appointments in her government, were her friends first. Long-time friends, and remained her friends. Some were not, but her friendships and her staff it was all, swirled together like a swirled cone, as it were.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe Ann Richards was one of the few women asked to run after her husband had passed it up. Is that correct? Her husband was interested in being in politics?
Her husband was approached by some people in the community who were politicos, who were all their good friends because they were a big political hangout and real party hangout too. And they said, well, David, he was a civil rights lawyer, and they wanted him to run for county commissioner, which has nothing to do with civil rights. It's an executive position like a small governor of a Travis County, which is an enormous county, very, very powerful job. And he said, no, I have my own fish to fry. I don't want to do that. And so then sort of just casually, they thought, well, Anne, why don't you run? And it was really so unlikely. Women never did jobs of that size. And then just as it happened, that's what happened. That's what she did. And she won. And she won by the guy who was in the job was a very weak performer. He was hardly around. He'd been in the job a long time. You could never get him on the phone, so they didn't have but $2. So one of the ads they made showed a still picture, a black and white picture of a phone. And you hear the phone ringing. Ring, 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 and his name on the desk.
That's a good ad. That's a good ad.
Remember that, Kirsten. And then the voiceover says, vote for a county commissioner who'll pick up the phone.
That's a good ad.
Use it.
So now, one of the things that we already brought up, but I'd love to go back to, is that, as Holland said, it wasn't just about women running for office. There are also many other ways that women could be involved. Senator and Amber and Holland, I'd love to hear from you your ideas about this notion.
Well, let's hear from the senator.
Absolutely.
Well, advocacy really matters. And what I'm most troubled by is that, even when we had a Democratic president and a Democratic Speaker of the House, we still debated the Stupak Amendment, which prevailed in the House, which limited women's reproductive freedoms to make decisions for themselves. That was a failure because we didn't have strong enough advocacy all across the nation and women weren't being heard. We just spent the last 2 years debating contraception, and I think if women across America were holding these elected leaders accountable, they wouldn't be permitted to distract the nation's debate on something that's long been settled. They should be focused on the economy and how do we create jobs and national security, things that are vital. And so what I'm hoping to engender is more participation and asking women to be heard because their voices are so important. Making sure these members of Congress listen to them and listen to their priorities is necessary.
Men and women's voices, everybody's voice.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Senator Gillibrand, that's because Anne was involved just on a local level with politics. She ran Sarah Weddington's 1972 campaign. And Sarah Weddington, for those who aren't aware, argued Roe v. Wade, and they were actually together when they got the telephone call that they had won.
That's incredible.
And Sarah, she was the first woman from Travis County, and then turned around and in 1974, just 2 years later, helped elect the first African American. So she was behind the scenes for a long time, helping her friends and helping her community. And it's really what gave her the passion to do what she did once she got in the governor's office.
Absolutely.
She never had any, she didn't see herself as a candidate until she was in her 40s. She was a worker in the field. And that's what we want people to do too. And it's not that everybody's going to become a candidate. It's just some kind of participation. But mainly Anne wanted people to participate in their own lives in a lively way, in a lively, committed way.
So speaking of that, if I understand correctly, she also felt very responsible to young women coming up behind her. She really encouraged them to get involved. She had, she brought women into the governor's mansion. She had a lot of women in her inner circle, as you already said. Senator and Amber, do you, as in your political lives, feel that you do need to mentor other young women and kind of pay it forward in that way?
Without a doubt. And in my own experience, I had a lot of mentors who helped me. My grandmother was a mentor. She was such a role model and got me interested in politics in the first place. Hillary Clinton was a real role model for me. I remember when I was first thinking about running for office in 2005, she looked at my poll, gave me her advice, she came to events, she helped me raise money. And so one of the things that I prioritize with Off the Sidelines is finding candidates across the country that I can seek out and help. And one example of a young candidate who impressed me so much, her name's Tulsi Gabbard, and I had lunch with her and thought, wow, she's going to make a difference. We need to help her get elected. And she still had a primary, but I was so impressed. I got involved right away. We raised her money right away. Soon thereafter, other major groups got involved in her race, including Emily's List, and they helped her raise money. And now she's a force in Congress. She's already in leadership. She's a freshman Congress member, and she's in Democratic leadership. She's gonna make her own mark on this country, and I just think she's terrific. So I really do seek out candidates, new candidates, trying to help them get their first race, but also help them in the decision-making process. A lot of times, as women, as mothers, we often either doubt ourselves or wonder, how am I going to balance my family with my work life? And so I give them my own view about what I do and what works for me, and that often helps for someone to figure out, well, how could it work for me? Well, and that kind of encouragement matters.
That's got to be invaluable advice, Senator. I mean, that seems to be, there's, so many things that women worry about when they're trying to decide whether to jump in the ring. And when we're recruiting women at Annie's List, we have women who think, well, what's going to happen to me if this doesn't work out? And how tough is it going to get along the way? And if you look back at someone like Ann Richards' race, her race got really tough. She had a really hard primary when she ran for governor, and then a really hard general election race. And she came out of it, on the other side and survived. And I think it's really important for young women who are thinking about running for office to see both successful candidates and also unsuccessful candidates, and to see that if you put yourself out there and you fight for what you believe in, you may not, particularly the first time, end up getting what you had set out to do, but you will have learned so much in the process, and other opportunities show up along the way, particularly once you put yourself out there as somebody who has an interest in the community and the people who live in it.
And I think one of the life lessons that Ann Richards really exemplifies is not being afraid. Ann didn't strike me as being afraid of anything or anybody, and that fearlessness is such an important quality for doing anything in life, and giving young women or new candidates, regardless of their age, that confidence that they do not have to be afraid, that the worst that's going to happen is someone's going to say something mean, and that's just the landscape you're playing on, and that's kind of the rules of the game. And if you begin to put it in that perspective and understand that by raising the level of the debate, by talking about issues that matter to you in your community, you're informing the debate, and that makes a difference in and of itself. That often empowers women to disregard any negativity they may hear or feel, because they're doing good work that makes a difference, that can help people.
But she would say that regardless of what a person's impulse was, whether it was in politics or not. I mean, it's about responding to what's in your core. And if your core is that everything you've ever wanted to do was work with children and have your own children and work with children in a school or something, that was your core. She wanted people to feel their core and go for it all in.
Holland, what do you think was Ann Richards' core? What was that core essence?
Well, I think what she cared about most was children and old people as she was governor. And I know Betty Benson, who is the sister, or it might be Betsy, I think it's Betty, the sister of Lloyd Benson, was on the board of UT, and she was trying to push the governor to do this legislation for the university. You'll like this, Kirsten, Senator. And Anne finally said to her, you know, I'm not going to fight for that legislation. The implication means she had only a certain amount of gunpowder. Yeah. She had to reserve it for what she said. I'm going to work for old people, and I'm going to work for the kids. The guys who, girls and guys who are in university, they're going to be fine. But the old people and the children are who need me to do something, and that's what I'm going to do. I've put something like that in the play.
I'd love to go back to this idea of fearlessness. Senator, how hard is it to be a political figure, and how hard was it for Ann Richards to have this kind of Teflon when people are criticizing your policies? And how much can you show vulnerability as a woman in politics?
Well, I think it's smart to show your emotions. I think it makes sense to talk about how you feel, and if you're angry or if you're upset or if you're concerned, people relate to real live emotions. And I've had emotional moments in my career when I'm so distressed about how a certain group of people are being treated or what their lives are like that it really comes out. I was very moved by the 9/11 heroes and the first responders who sacrificed so much, and you know, telling my constituents and my colleagues about their lives was really very emotional. The same thing was true with Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, because to meet these brave soldiers who have given everything and were willing to give their lives to say they can't serve because of who they love, I couldn't think of a greater injustice. And so I think emotions, and I think women's ability to assess other people's emotions is what makes them good at their jobs and actually more relatable, and they can relate and connect with people where their hearts are and what matters most. So I think being a woman makes a difference. But in terms of fearlessness and courage, you know, I was able to be less afraid than perhaps an average first-time candidate because I had a role model in my mother and in my grandmother and in Hillary Clinton. I had all these role models of women who had battled much more difficult battles than I had ever incurred in my own life, and saw how they weathered those storms. And that helped me not be afraid. And so I think that's why women speaking out, telling their stories matters a lot, because for someone making a decision, they can look at somebody else's life and say, well, they did it, and they handled it, and they found their balance, and they, you know, withstood negative press or whatever it might be on that particular potential candidate's mind, or some community activist. I think the life stories of other people matter, and that's why the play Anne rang so true to me, and it was so important to highlight and focus on, because she weathered incredible storms, not only gracefully, but with extraordinary grit. And that's the kind of woman I want to be in my political career.
I think that's the kind of woman you are, Senator.
Yes.
You know, I would love to hear about this vulnerability that must, for you also as an actor, be something that you tap into, showing the audience, you know, really connecting emotionally with them. Do you see a connection between acting and being a politician?
Well, not off the top of my head, except that you do want to communicate. And as an actor, I've had to learn over my lifetime, what is it that will allow the audience to get in there and to see and to feel. And it's something ineffable sometimes. You just learn it because you feel it. You sense that it's happening. And then your whole body says, whatever it is, that this place that I'm in right now, this is what is going to communicate. So your body learns. It's like learning a tennis stroke. Your body makes it. You learn how to do that serve. Your body has learned it. So I think all politicians who are sensitive do find the groove. And I know Senator Gillibrand is well on her way to being in that groove, seriously.
Katie, and if I can just say, Mary Beth Rogers was the chief of staff for Governor Richards when she first got into the governor's office. She had been with her in the when she was treasurer, and she had been her friend and helped her win election to Travis County Commissioner's office. And when I talked with her about the play, which she saw in March, she said that it literally took her breath away. The way that Ms. Taylor got into the physical demeanor of Ann Richards, she said her facial expressions, her hands, her walk, but most importantly, just Holland's whole ability to capture and sense of frustration, or her real need to get things done while she had a chance to do it, that it literally took Mary Beth's breath away.
That's a wonderful thing to hear. I love Mary Beth very much, and I know all about her history with Anne and the different characters of the friendships of the different 5 principal women or so, and men around Anne, all had different relationships, but they were all of the same juicy human quality. She said you probably know more about Anne than any one of them individually. Individually, I still said that too. I said in a broad general way, because understand in my research, I was not going for a whole history of her. I was looking for her persona.
Well, you got it.
So we're just going to wrap up here shortly, but I'd love to ask a few more questions that have been sent in by readers. This one is from Michelle P. If Anne were able to give us one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'll say what I say at the end of the play, because it's so simple. You know, the play is a graduation speech. That's the framework. And then within the graduation speech, magic happens because you're in the theater, and theater is about magic, like the way when children play. And they say, well, if you're over there, you're an Indian. If you're here, you're a cowboy. And at the end of the play, she closes the graduation speech very, very simply by saying, I wish for you that you would value the love of your friends and your family as if your life depends on it, because it does. That you would take a chance on your dreams and bet on yourself and just trust that your wings will catch the wind. You got to go out on a limb because that's where the fruit is.
That's great.
So Senator Amber and Holland, I'd just love to ask you each to perhaps contribute a final thought to our Google Hangout. You know, where to go from here, where the play is going from here.
Well, Amber, go ahead.
First, so that you can end with the Senator or Holland. I just wanted to echo, I think, what Holland said. I think that is the central message that Anne would tell anybody. Just don't be afraid. Just go try to do what it is you think you need and should do. And if, like the Senator said, if somebody calls you bad names, they just were mean to you. So what? Because I think that really is her essential message. Don't wait till you're 110% qualified to do something. Don't hold yourself back. And then I would just leave y'all with one other thought, one other thing that you see a lot when you're at the Capitol in Austin. There's a big, giant rotunda, and we call it the Pink Dome because the Capitol in Austin is made of pink granite. So it's this big pink dome with this gorgeous rotunda. And they have portraits of the governors all along the wall. And many people have remarked, and you can see on any given day, tours of school children coming through the rotunda, and they stop there and they look at the portraits of all the former governors. And you will invariably see a young girl who looks up at Ann Richards' portrait and says, oh, look, there's a girl. There's a girl. And I think one cannot begin to measure what type of impact that has on a state and the society.
I agree with that. I think that is so important. And, you know, for all of our readers and all of our participants and off the sidelines, I think my parting message is something that Ann Richards truly believed in, that each and every one of you has a voice, and that voice matters, and that the country is frankly counting on you to use your voice, because if you're not being heard, if you're not holding these members accountable, if you're not setting the agenda, it means the nation is worse off because of it. We need your voice. It matters. can change the world. So don't be shy and participate on whatever level you feel comfortable, whether it's just voting or being an advocate or writing a blog or really being tough on elected leaders and how they vote, or running for office yourself, or helping another woman who's running for office. All of it matters, and all of it has an impact. And I just want to encourage you and thank you for all that you do.
To that point, Kirsten, let me, I keep calling you that, and I don't know why I do, Senator. I'm pardon
Kirsten is fine.
Thank you. I think what I would add, if I can make this brief, is that, of course, I am for Emily's List and Annie's List and absolutely any organization that supports, aids, and contributes to women getting into government service, public service, or really anything at all. But ultimately what I would like is for that to be less and less needed, and what I would like is, and for our country, for the government to, as Anne made true in Texas, for the government to a little bit more look like the population of the state. I don't want, I want this, our government to have all men and women in reflection of the society, and for no one to ever say a woman politician. And now they're still saying woman writer. And think, what the hell would you think if you introduced an author, Robert Caro? We have a man or historian here. Don't need this man historian. It's really, it's such default thinking. I want this default thinking to be blown away from our culture and just be men and women as a people.
Yeah, absolutely. All of you, thank you so much for joining this Google Plus Hangout. Senator Amber Holland Taylor, it's been such a wonderful experience to hear your thoughts on the play, on where women are going in politics in America. And I guess we'll sign off with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Holland. Thank you, Sam.
Bye-bye. Thank you.